Hello everyone, Jeff the Green Review here. Most plants require four things to grow: air, sunlight, water, and soil. It's important to understand soils as they provide most plants with the water and nutrients they need, besides anchoring them in place. The first thing a new seed does as it germinates is to grow a root that contacts soil. Soil is not dirt. Dirt is unwanted debris. Soil is a combination of air, water, chemicals, minerals, living organisms, and organic matter arranged in a stable structure. Soil is not solid, as it is partly solid, partly liquid, and partly air. The ideal Goldilocks thrive range soil depends on what you're trying to grow. An ideal soil for a cactus is different than an ideal soil for a tomato or a water lily. An ideal soil for a cactus will have a very high pore volume and low water retention. The water lily soil will have all the pores filled with water. An ideal mesic garden soil for most garden plants is approximately 50% solid matter, 45% mineral, and 5% organic. Depending on the soil type, as much as 1% can be live organisms. The remaining 50% of the ideal soil volume is evenly split between air-filled spaces, or pores, and water-filled pores. Of course, these latter two functions fluctuate wildly depending on the amount of moisture currently in the soil. The moisture content will be higher after rain or irrigation. Soil development is an ongoing process called weathering that transforms minerals from rocks and organic matter from plants into soil. Mineral material comes from bedrock, wind-blown sand, alluvium, which is material left over from river overflows, glacial till, ground-up deposits from glaciers, glacial outwash, deposits from glacier meltwater, and ocean sediments. All these materials may begin transforming into soil while fresh or after having been covered by other layers hundreds of feet deep and then brought to the surface through continental upheavals and erosion. These parent materials may be transported hundreds or even thousands of miles by wind and water before being weathered into soil. Plant materials are broken down by animal actions, erosion, freezing and thawing, glaciers, wave action, chemical reactions with acids, oxygen, and water. Small rock pieces have larger surface areas for their volume and become more and more chemically active as they become smaller. Volcanic and ocean deposits formed in bedrock in layers builds up in multiple occurrences of continental lifting and settling. The bedrock has its own hills and valleys and has been buckled in various places. In some locations, the bedrock is at the surface. In other locations, it's buried thousands of feet deep. When near the surface, it directly influences soil formation. The textbook progression of bedrock to soil was not how soils formed in areas that were covered by glaciers or oceans. In areas under or near where the North American glaciers formed, the bedrock has less of an influence on soil formation. Glaciers are large chunks of ice that sometimes move and sometimes are stationary. It is estimated that some parts of these glaciers were more than a mile thick. A 1 cubic foot piece of ice weighs about 57 pounds, making a 1 mile tall piece of ice would weigh 57.2 times 5,280, or 302,016 pounds, or 151 tons per square foot. That much weight changes the bedrock under the glacier, so that in some places depressions were formed, eventually being the Great Lakes and other lakes. The weight causes pressure that forces the bottom of the glacier to spread out and to melt into water, like under Antarctica and Greenland's ice sheets right now. This water either sits in a pool to form lakes when the ice melts, or while the glacier was in place, it moved like a river that washed away organic matter, silt, clay, sand, and gravel that was in place before the glacier formed. Glacial drift consists of unsorted debris dropped by glaciers. Glaciers advanced and retreated many times, leaving mounds of debris called moraines. Flowing water from the glaciers sorted the deposits in many areas. Moraines occasionally backed up, melting glacier water into large lakes. Sometimes the moraines broke and the floodwaters washed glacial deposits away from large areas. Continental glaciers may have grown and retreated dozens or even hundreds of miles in times as short as months or years. leaving vast land areas exposed to the air. Glacial river valleys dried up in the winter, leaving large areas of silt exposed to the wind. No vegetation could cover such large areas quickly enough to prevent giant dust storms. Winds dried out the landscape of glacial drift and sometimes blew fine clay and silt particles away. Vast areas of dust deposits cover the bedrock and glacial deposits with this fine wind-blown clay and silt material called loess. Loess may cover 10% of the land on Earth, including the fertile farmlands of the middle of the United States and the Palouse region of Washington and Oregon and Idaho. Its depth varies greatly. The greatest loess deposits can be over 100 feet thick. Ancient storms laid down thick amounts of loess, sometimes very quickly. Large animals like mammoths were occasionally buried alive and standing up in such storms. In Siberia, the loess-covered mammoths were frozen in permafrost and have recently been discovered still standing and with undigested food still in their stomachs. The bedrock and glacial parent material breaks down into soil by a process called weathering. Precipitation, erosion, frost, and plants and animals all contribute to weathering. Soils weather faster with more precipitation. Small particles and organic matter wash away and move deeper into the ground. Soils on slopes erode so that the lower areas have more organic matter, silt, and clay than the tops of the slope. Look at farm fields in the winter and you'll notice rocks exposed in the slopes and blacker soil on flat, low-lying areas. Soils in the western U.S. often have a volcanic ash subsoil layer that has weathered into the current topsoil. A longer growing season between frosts means more plant growth and more organic matter accumulation. It also means a longer growing season for the microorganisms that break down organic matter. Warm climates can have so much breakdown of organic matter that little is found in the soil, and farm soil doesn't produce as well. That's why farmers in the tropics move their farms every few years. Without accumulations of organic matter, soils in the southern United States are not as productive as those in the north. Eroded soils in the south are often more acidic and need applications of lime to raise the pH to acceptable levels. Native vegetation and animals and microorganisms vary with soil materials, climate, slope, and soil moisture, and maintenance, such as fire. The live components have an effect upon the recycling of soil nutrients and the accumulation of organic matter. So what's this mean to me? Don't treat soil like dirt. Proper soil for the plants you're trying to grow may be the most important environmental factor you can influence that will help your plants thrive. Soil needs to have plenty of air, nutrients, and water accessible for the plant. If any one part is missing or has too much, the plants won't grow well. And this is Jeff with the Green Review. Thanks for watching.